Hello students, welcome to the lecture on reinforcement learning, and after this lecture we will be able to learn the following objectives: understand reinforcement, define contributing disciplines, discuss organizational context, describe social cognitive perspective, learning about humanistic psychology framework, explain learning strategy. Let's start with the concept of reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is an approach to artificial intelligence that emphasizes learning by the individual from its interaction with its environment. This contrasts with classical approaches to artificial intelligence and machine learning, which have downplayed learning from interaction, focusing instead on learning from a knowledgeable teacher or on reasoning from a complete model of the environment. Modern reinforcement learning research is highly interdisciplinary. It includes researchers specializing in operations research, genetic algorithms, neural networks, psychology, and control engineering. Reinforcement learning is learning what to do, how to map situations to actions so as to maximize a scalar reward signal. The learner is not told which action to take, as in most forms of machine learning, but instead must discover which actions yield the most rewarded by trying them. In the most interesting and challenging cases, actions may affect not only the immediate reward, but also the next situation, and through that, all subsequent rewards. These two characteristics, trial and error search and delayed reward, are the two most important distinguishing features of reinforcement learning. Let us now discuss the reinforcement. Reinforcement describes a relationship between learner behavior and a consequence that follows the behavior. This relationship is only considered reinforcement if the consequence increases the probability that a behavior will occur in the future or at least be maintained. For example, children learn to ask for something politely if they want to receive it in return. The ultimate goal of reinforcement is to help learners with ASD learn new skills and maintain their use over time in a variety of settings with many different individuals. As such, teachers and other practitioners must identify the appropriate reinforcers that motivate individual learners with ASD. Reinforcement is a fundamental practice that is almost always used with other evidence-based practices such as prompting, time delay, functional communication training, and differential reinforcement of other behaviors. As a practice, reinforcement is either positive or negative. Positive reinforcement refers to the presentation of a reinforcer after a learner uses a target skill behavior. Reinforcement is most effective when it is individualized for a particular learner with ASD and when it is presented in response to a learner's use of a target skill behavior. Elements of reinforcement learning. Beyond the agent and the environment, one can identify four main sub-elements to a reinforcement learning system: a policy, a reward function, a value function, and optionally a model of the environment. A policy defines the learning agent's way of behaving at a given time. Roughly speaking, a policy is a mapping from perceived states of the environment to actions to be taken when in those states. A reward function. It defines the goal in a reinforcement learning problem. Roughly speaking, it maps perceived states or state action pairs of the environment to a single number, a reward, indicating the intrinsic desirability of the state. A value function specifies what is good in the long run. Roughly speaking, the value of a state is the total amount of reward an agent can expect to accumulate over the future starting from that state. Types of reinforcement. Reinforcement can include anything that strengthens or increases a behavior, including stimuli, events, and situations. In a classroom setting, for example, types of reinforcement might include praise, getting out of unwanted work, token rewards, candy, extra playtime, and fun activities. There are two major categories of reinforcement. Primary reinforcement, sometimes referred to as unconditional reinforcement, occurs naturally and does not require learning in order to work. Secondary reinforcement. Secondary reinforcement is also known as conditioned reinforcement. It involves stimuli that have become rewarding by being paired with another reinforcing stimulus. Now moving on to the next topic, we will study contributing disciplines. Organizational behavior is a behavioral science that is built upon contributions from a number of behavioral disciplines. The dominant areas are psychology, sociology, social psychology, anthropology, and political science. As we shall learn, psychology's contributions have been mainly at the micro level of analysis. The other four disciplines have contributed to understanding of macro concepts such as organization and group process. Psychology. Psychology has perhaps the most influence on the field of organizational behavior because it is a science of behavior. Almost all aspects of behavior are studied by psychologists. Psychology deals with studying human behavior that seeks to measure, explain, and sometimes change the behavior of humans and other animals. Some of the numerous areas of interest within the disciplines of psychology are general psychology, experimental psychology, clinical psychology, consumer psychology, sociology. The major focus of sociologists is on studying the social systems in which individuals fill their roles. The focus of attention is centered on group dynamics. They have made their greatest contribution to OB through their study of group behavior in organization. particularly formal and complex organizations. Sociological concepts, theories, models, and techniques help significantly to understand better the group dynamics, organizational culture, the formal organization theory and structure, organizational technology, bureaucracy, communications, power, conflict, and intergroup behavior. The key concepts of sociology. Most sociologists today identify the discipline by using one of the three statements. Sociology deals with human interaction, and this interaction is the key influencing factor among people in social settings. Sociology is a study of plural behavior. Two or more interacting persons constitute a plurality pattern of behavior. Sociology is the systematic study of social systems. A social system is an operational social unit that is structured to serve a purpose. It consists of two or more persons of different status with different roles playing a part in a pattern that is sustained by a physical and cultural base. Social psychology. Social psychology is an area within psychology, but it blends concepts from psychology and sociology. It concentrates on the influence of people on one another. One of the major areas receiving considerable investigation from social psychologists have been change, how to implement it, how to reduce barriers to its acceptance. In addition, social psychologists are making significant contributions in the areas of measuring, understanding, and changing attitudes, communication, patterns, the way in which group activities can satisfy individual needs and group decision-making process. In general, sociology focuses on how groups, organizations, social categories, and societies are organized, how they function, how they change. The unit of analysis is the group as a whole rather than the individuals who compose the group. Social psychology deals with many of the same phenomena but seeks to explain whole individual human interaction and human cognition, influences culture and is influenced by culture. The unit of analysis is the individual within the group. In reality, some forms of sociology are closely related to social psychology. Anthropology. Anthropology is the study of societies to learn about human beings and their activities. Anthropologists' work on culture and environment, for instance, has helped us understand differences in fundamental values, attitudes, and behavior between people in different countries and within different organizations. The main aim of anthropology is to acquire a better understanding of the relationship between the human being and the environment. Adaptations to surroundings constitute culture. The manner in which people view the environment is a part of culture. Culture includes those ideas shared by groups of individuals and languages by which these ideas are communicated. In essence, culture is a system of learned behavior. political science. Contributions of political scientists are significant to the understanding of behavior in organizations. Political scientists study the behavior of individuals and groups within the political environment. They contribute to understand the dynamics of power centers, structuring of conflict and conflict resolution tactics, allocation of power, and how people manipulate power for individual self-interest. Let's know the meaning of organizational context. No one can avoid experiencing organizations. From the moment we are born and until we die, lives are governed and constrained by organizations, and almost everyone works in an organization at some point, albeit some are very small and some very large. However, even if we operate a single-person small business, we will still be part of a larger organization, network of suppliers and customers. Although we have this all-pervading organizational experience, not very many people think deeply about how the organizational environment of work shapes and constrains the issues managers have to address. The metaphors we adopt in thinking about organizations shape the way we conceptualize the whole managerial endeavor. The dominant metaphor for organizations is of the organization as a machine. This is a very powerful metaphor that we will explore. This metaphor defines the central problem facing managers in organizations as one of control. Controlling relationships with the external environments such as markets or political policies to ensure that the organization achieves profits, or internally ensuring that the people employed work to achieve the organization's mission. Social cognitive perspective. Social cognitive theory, SCT, refers to a psychological model of behavior that emerged primarily from the work of Albert Bandura, 1977-1986. Initially developed with an emphasis on the acquisition of social behaviors, SCT continues to emphasize that learning occurs in a social context and that much of what is learned is gained through observation. SCT has been applied broadly to such diverse areas of human functioning as career choice, organizational behavior, athletics, and mental and physical health. SCT also has been applied extensively by those interested in understanding classroom motivation, learning, and achievement. Pajaris, 1996, Schunk and Zimmerman, 1994-1998. SCT rests on several basic assumptions about learning and behavior. One assumption concerns triadic reciprocity, or the view that personal, behavioral, and environmental factors influence one another in a bidirectional, reciprocal fashion. A closely related assumption within SCT is that people have an agency or ability to influence their own behavior and the environment in a purposeful, goal-directed fashion. A third assumption within SCT is that learning can occur without an immediate change in behavior, or more broadly, that learning and the demonstration of what has been learned are distinct processes. One reason for this separation is that SCT also assumes that learning involves not just the acquisition of new behaviors, but also of knowledge, cognitive skills, concepts, abstract rules, values, and other cognitive constructs. Humanistic psychology framework. Humanistic psychology is a psychological perspective that emphasizes the study of the whole person. Humanistic psychologists look at human behavior not only through the eyes of the observer, but through the eyes of the person doing the behaving. Humanistic psychologists believe that an individual's behavior is connected to his inner feelings and self-image. Unlike the behaviorist, humanistic psychologists believe that humans are not solely the product of their environment. Rather, humanistic psychologists study human meanings, understandings, and experiences involved in growing, teaching, and learning. They emphasize characteristics that are shared by all human beings, such as love, grief, caring, and self-worth. Humanistic psychologists study how people are influenced by their self-perceptions and the personal meanings attached to their experiences. Humanistic psychologists are not primarily concerned with instinctual drives, responses to external stimuli, or past experiences. Rather, they consider conscious choices, responses to internal needs, and current circumstances to be important in shaping human behavior. Humanistic psychology emerged during the 1950s and 1960s out of a reaction against the two schools that had dominated psychology up till then: psychoanalysis and behaviorism. Humanistic psychologists such as Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers rejected the psychoanalytical approach as regarding human beings as being little better than animals, driven and controlled by a bundle of unconscious, instinctive forces.
The secular humanist worldview is molded by its doctrines of atheism, naturalism, and evolution. This can be seen even in their psychology. Humanists embrace third force psychology, which is based almost exclusively on the work of Abraham Maslow, Rollo May, Erich Fromm, and Carl Rogers. Their psychological goal is known as self-actualization. It focuses on man's inherent goodness and predicts that every individual can achieve mental health simply by getting in touch with and actualizing his real self. Secular humanists call for individuals to become self-actualized by meeting all their personal needs. In essence, this psychology teaches individuals to turn to themselves for answers to their problems.
The secular humanists, psychologically speaking, wrap themselves around the concept of self-actualization. In fact, the humanists love the notion of self. The concept of soul and spirit, even character, is sort of gone by the wayside right now. And the emphasis is on the self, and what they want us to believe is that each self can look inside and try to figure out what's really going on, that we can find out the answers to the world and ethical answers and what's right and what's wrong inside of us. Well, the truth is the self, by itself, can't give us a whole lot. And even the secular humanists write books for the self to read. So we're actually going outside of ourselves to read their materials as well.
Self-actualization calls for the person struggling with self-esteem to abandon all feelings of inferiority and guilt. Humanist psychologists believe that guilt is forced upon individuals by corrupt social institutions and religious beliefs, and Christianity is the chief culprit. Many secular humanists explain away religious belief as either a symptom or a cause of mental illness. They blame many of society's problems on religion rather than the reality of human sin.
Carl Rogers. Though I am very well aware of the incredible amount of destructive, cruel, malevolent behavior in today's world, I do not find that this evil is inherent in human nature. Humanism decrees that human nature is essentially good and all humans, once free from belief in the supernatural, can become self-actualized, perfected world citizens fit for a new world order. Corliss Lamont. Human beings possess the power or potential of solving their own problems through reliance primarily upon reason and scientific method applied with courage and vision. Since secular humanists believe that only the physical world exists, that there is not a spiritual side to humans, they have a monistic view of reality. Psychological monism is the belief that all of reality is one substance, and therefore the mind is reduced to nothing more than the physical brain. Dualism, on the other hand, affirms the existence of both the natural and the spiritual. According to secular humanists, monism is the only rational, scientific way to perceive man and his thoughts.
Individual behavior understanding individuals in organizations is an important consideration for all managers. A basic framework that can be used to facilitate this understanding is the psychological contract, the set of expectations held by people with respect to what they will contribute to the organization and what they expect to get in return. Organizations strive to achieve an optimal person-job fit, but this process is complicated by the existence of individual differences. Personality is the relatively stable set of psychological and behavioral attributes that distinguish one person from another. The big five personality traits are agreeableness, conscientiousness, negative emotionality, extraversion, and openness. Other important traits are locus of control, self-efficacy, authoritarianism, Machiavellism, and self-esteem and risk propensity. Attitudes are based on emotion, knowledge, and intended behavior. Whereas personality is relatively stable, some attitudes can be formed and changed easily. Others are more constant. Job satisfaction or dissatisfaction and organizational commitment are important work-related attitudes. Perception is the set of process by which an individual becomes aware of and interprets information about the environment. Basic perceptual processes include selective perception and stereotyping. Perception and attribution are also closely related. Learning strategy. Everyone has their own preference for a strategy to learn and study. Some prefer to make a summary, others highlight or underline important text and read the same text several times. But the preference that someone follows is not always the most effective strategy. There is a distinction between learning strategies at a superficial level and at a deeper level. Learning through repetition is an example of learning at a superficial level. Learning at a deeper level involves, for example, the ability to determine important information and make connections between certain concepts. Learning at a deeper level has proven to be a better predictor for successful learning in the long term than on a superficial level. Self-regulating capacity has a positive relationship with academic achievement. When someone has a large self-regulating capacity, she is well able to orient, plan, monitor and adapt his or her behavior or learning processes and strategies during learning tasks. In addition, it also appears that self-directed learning has a positive correlation with academic success. Such a person is able to assess his or her own learning needs, establish personal goals, take decisions about which learning strategies to use, and is able to assess the outcomes. The literature shows a positive correlation between self-esteem and academic achievement, but it is not clear which way this effect works. The assumption is that the higher our self-esteem, the better perform in school. But it is also possible that the effect works the other way around. The better performance in school, the higher our self-esteem is as a result. Self-efficacy is a term used in education to indicate whether a person believes he or she is able to successfully complete courses or certain specific tasks. Definition of learning. The process of learning is an active field of scientific study in biologic sciences including biochemistry, brain imaging, and electropsychology, as well as in psychology and education. Herein, I present with some information to help me understand what happens in brain when we learn so that it might help we organize, manage and use a large amount of material that must master during college career. Learning starts by communication and communication requires language, either written or spoken. The student must understand the language to proceed, and by this I mean that the words used must mean the same thing to the instructor and the student. Introductory biology has more new words in the first semester than most introductory foreign language courses. Theories of learning. It is a type of learning that occurs as a function of observing, retaining and replicating novel behavior executed by others, occurs when an observer's behavior changes after viewing the behavior of a model, also known as vicarious learning, social learning or modeling. According to Bandura, observational learning may or may not involve imitation. Social learning theory holds that children in particular learn by observing and imitating models. Children take an active part in their own learning. The child's own characteristics influence the choice of models. Types of learners. Whenever we are going to present to a group, we must consider who makes up the group and how best we can reach them. There are two major types of learners. Activists. Activists involve themselves fully and without bias in new experiences. Reflectors. Reflectors like to stand back to ponder experience and observe them from many different perspectives. Now in the end, let us summarize what we have learned in this lecture. Reinforcement learning is learning what to do, how to do, map situations to actions so as to maximize a scalar reward signal. Positive reinforcement refers to the presentation of a reinforcer after a learner uses a target skill behavior. A policy defines the learning agent's way of behaving at a given time. Rewards are in a sense primary, whereas values as predictions of rewards are secondary. sometimes referred to as unconditional reinforcement, occurs naturally and does not require learning in order to work. Organizational behavior is a behavioral science that is built upon contributions from a number of behavioral disciplines. Sociology deals with human interaction, and this interaction is the key influencing factor among people in social settings. Social psychology is an area within psychology, but it blends concepts from psychology and sociology. Anthropology is the study of societies to learn about human beings and their activities.